The wind howled like a wounded beast as Hannah McAllister ran through the deep snow, her breath coming in ragged gasps that crystallized in the frigid Colorado air. Behind her, the distant shouts of Sheriff Blackburn and his deputies grew louder, their lanterns bobbing like vengeful spirits against the darkening February sky of 1878. Hannah's legs burned with each desperate stride, her thin boots soaked through as she plunged knee-deep into snowdrifts. Leadville's mountain winter showed no mercy to those foolish enough to brave its fury, especially those fleeing the law. 3 days on the run had left her exhausted, hungry, and dangerously close to surrendering to the cold that nipped at her fingers and toes with increasing ferocity. "She went this way," the sheriff's voice carried on the wind. "That McAllister woman can't have gotten far in this blizzard." Panic surged through Hannah as she stumbled forward, her numbed feet betraying her as she fell face first into the snow. For a moment, she lay there, the cold seeping into her bones, tempting her to give up. But the thought of being dragged back to Leadville in chains propelled her forward. She hadn't killed her husband, no matter what the evidence suggested or what the town believed. Through the swirling snow, Hannah spotted a faint light in the distance, a lone farmhouse set back from the main trail, its barn a hulking shadow against the white landscape. With renewed determination, she pushed toward it, praying for sanctuary as the voices behind her grew louder. The barn door was mercifully unlocked. Hannah slipped inside, the relative warmth a shocking contrast to the biting cold outside. The sweet smell of hay and livestock enveloped her as she stood shivering, listening to the sounds of horses shuffling in their stalls. "Who's there?" A deep voice cut through the darkness. Hannah froze, her heart pounding wildly. A lantern flared to life, illuminating the rugged features of a man she'd never seen before. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore a weather-beaten sheepskin coat, his dark hair falling across his forehead as he studied her with suspicious green eyes. "Please," Hannah whispered, her voice breaking. "They're coming for me, the sheriff. I didn't do what they say. I didn't kill anyone." The man stepped closer, the lantern casting long shadows across the barn. Hannah noticed the gun holstered at his hip, and she tensed, wondering if she'd made a fatal mistake. "Sheriff Blackburn?" he asked, his expression unreadable. Hannah nodded, unable to stop her violent shivering. "I'm innocent. Please believe me." For a long moment he said nothing, simply studying her face as if searching for the truth in her eyes. Then, to her surprise, he extinguished the lantern. "Up there," he said, pointing to a loft. "Behind the hay bales, move now." Hannah scrambled up the ladder, her frozen fingers protesting as she wedged herself between the stacked hay and the barn wall. Below, the cowboy, moved with purpose, covering her tracks with fresh straw before casually leaning against a post, producing a whittling knife and a small piece of wood from his pocket. Moments later, the barn door burst open, bringing with it a gust of snow and the imposing figure of Sheriff Blackburn, flanked by 2 deputies. "Evening, Sheriff," the cowboy drawled, not looking up from his whittling. "Mighty cold night to be out." "Samuel Mercer," the sheriff acknowledged with a curt nod. "We're tracking a fugitive. Hannah McAllister. Killed her husband 3 nights back. Seen anyone pass through?" "Samuel Mercer." Hannah committed the name to memory as she held her breath, pressing herself deeper into the shadows. "Can't say that I have," Samuel replied, his voice betraying no hint of deception. "Been in here most of the evening, tending to my sick mare. Nobody's come this way but you 3. Sheriff Blackburn stomped his boots, shaking off snow. "Mind if we take a look around? Woman's dangerous." "Shot her husband while he slept, then fled." Hannah bit her lip to keep from crying out in protest. James had been alive when she left him, drunk and raging, but alive. "Suit yourself," Samuel said with a shrug, gesturing around the barn. "Though I'd appreciate if you'd be quick about it." "Got animals that spook easy." The deputies moved efficiently, checking stalls and storage areas. One of them approached the ladder to the loft, and Hannah's heart nearly stopped. "Found something," Blackburn called. The deputy shook his head. "Just more hay." "Check it anyway," the sheriff insisted. Samuel cleared his throat. "I wouldn't bother if I were you. Had a raccoon family up there last month. Nasty creatures. Set some traps this morning that I haven't had a chance to check. Wouldn't want you losing any fingers." The deputy hesitated, glancing at his boss. "Leave it," Blackburn decided after a moment. "We're wasting time. If she came this way, she's long gone by now." He turned to Samuel. "If you see her, Mercer, you send word immediately. Woman's dangerous." "Will do, Sheriff," Samuel replied, tipping his head respectfully. The three lawmen departed, the howling wind swallowing the sound of their retreat. Samuel waited several minutes before lighting the lantern again and calling softly, "They're gone. You can come down now." Hannah descended the ladder with shaking limbs, collapsing onto a hay bale at the bottom. Now that the immediate danger had passed, the full weight of her exhaustion crashed over her. "Thank you," she managed, teeth still chattering. "You didn't have to help me." Samuel regarded her thoughtfully. "Did you do it? Kill your husband?" Hannah met his gaze squarely. "No, James was alive when I left him." "Then why run?" She laughed bitterly. "Because in Leadville, a woman's word means nothing against evidence and rumor. James had enemies, powerful ones. When they found him dead, it was easier to blame his wife than look elsewhere." She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stop shivering. "He wasn't a good man, Mr. Mercer, but I didn't kill him." Samuel studied her for a long moment before nodding. "You're half frozen." "Can't stay in the barn, you'll be dead by morning." He held out his hand. "Come on, house isn't much, but it's warm." Hannah hesitated. "Why are you helping me?" A shadow crossed his face. "Let's just say I know something about being wrongfully accused." He gestured toward the barn door. "You coming or not? Your choice." Seeing few alternatives, Hannah took his offered hand and followed him into the blinding snow, toward the small farmhouse where a single lamp burned in the window, a beacon of hope in the Colorado wilderness. The farmhouse was modest but neat, with a fire crackling in the stone hearth. Samuel led Hannah inside, quickly closing the door against the howling wind. The warmth enveloped her immediately, making her numb extremities tingle painfully as sensation returned. "Sit," he instructed, pointing to a chair near the fire. "I'll find you some dry clothes." Hannah sank gratefully into the seat, extending her hands toward the flames. As Samuel disappeared into another room, she took the opportunity to survey her surroundings. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, sparsely furnished but tidy. A few books were stacked on a side table, and a rifle hung above the mantel. It wasn't the home of a wealthy man, but one who took pride in what he had. Samuel returned with a bundle of clothing. "These belonged to my sister when she stayed with me last summer. They'll be big on you, but they're dry." "Your sister visits often?" Hannah asked, accepting the clothes. A shadow crossed his face. "Not anymore. She's in Denver now." He gestured toward a door. "You can change in there." "I'll make some coffee." The bedroom was as simple as the main room, a bed with a handmade quilt, a wooden chest, and a small table with a basin. Hannah changed quickly, grateful for the dry clothing even if the trousers and flannel shirt hung loosely on her frame. She found a belt among the items and cinched it around her waist. When she emerged, Samuel was pouring steaming coffee into 2 tin cups. He glanced up, his expression unreadable as he took in her appearance. "Better?" he asked, handing her a cup. Hannah nodded, wrapping her fingers around the warm metal. "Thank you for everything." "Don't thank me yet," Samuel replied, settling into a chair opposite hers. "Sheriff's likely to come back once the storm dies down. Blackburn's not known for giving up easily." "I know," Hannah said softly. "He was my husband's friend." Samuel raised an eyebrow. "That complicates things." "Everything about my situation is complicated, Mr. Mercer." "Sam," he corrected. "If you're wearing my sister's clothes and drinking my coffee, you might as well use my name." Hannah managed a small smile. "Sam, then, I'm Hannah." "I gathered that from the sheriff's description." He studied her over the rim of his cup. "Want to tell me what really happened?" Hannah sighed, staring into the fire. "I married James McAllister 4 years ago. He owned the largest silver mine in Leadville, the reason most folks settled there in the first place. I was working as a schoolteacher, new to town." She paused, memories washing over her. "He was charming at first, generous. I thought I was fortunate." "And you weren't," Sam supplied. "No," Hannah agreed. "Once we were married, everything changed. His temper. It was terrible. And when the mine started failing last year, it got worse." She unconsciously touched a fading bruise on her wrist. 3 nights ago, he came home drunk, raging about money problems. He hit me harder than usual. I managed to get away, grabbed a few things, and ran. I planned to take the morning stage to Denver, stay with a cousin. But he turned up dead before you could leave," Sam finished. Hannah nodded, blinking back tears. "Someone shot him in our bed that night. The housekeeper found him the next morning. Sheriff Blackburn came looking for me immediately, never even questioned anyone else." Sam was quiet for a long moment, contemplating her story. "Who do you think did it?" James had a business partner, Victor Holloway. They'd been arguing for months about the mine. Victor wanted to sell, James refused. Hannah set down her cup. "The night James died, I heard him tell Victor he'd discovered something, that the mine wasn't failing after all, that Victor had been stealing from him." "So Victor had motive," Sam mused. "But why frame you?" Hannah gave a bitter laugh. "Everyone in town knew James mistreated me. It was the perfect opportunity. And with me gone, who would question it?" Sam leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "You've got yourself in quite a situation, Hannah McAllister." "I'm aware," she replied dryly. "And I've dragged you into it now. I'm sorry for that." To her surprise, a hint of a smile touched Sam's lips. "Don't be. Makes for an interesting change from ranching." He stood, adding wood to the fire. "You should rest. Take the bedroom. I'll sleep out here." "I couldn't." "You can and you will," he interrupted. "You look dead on your feet. We can figure out next steps in the morning." Too exhausted to argue, Hannah nodded gratefully. As she stood to go, a sudden thought struck her. "Sam, how do you know something about being wrongfully accused?" His face closed off immediately. "That's a story for another time. Get some rest, Hannah." As she settled into the unfamiliar bed, Hannah listened to the storm raging outside. For the first time in days, despite the danger still pursuing her, she felt oddly safe. The mystery of Samuel Mercer was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, she would simply be grateful for his unexpected kindness. Hannah woke to sunlight streaming through thin curtains. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then the events of the previous night came rushing back: her flight through the snow, the sheriff's pursuit, and the cowboy who had hidden her away. The smell of cooking food drew her from the bedroom. Sam stood at the stove, his back to her, as he tended to a skillet of frying bacon. He'd shaved, she noticed, and changed into a clean shirt. "Morning," she said softly. He turned, spatula in hand. "You slept nearly 12 hours. Was starting to wonder if you'd wake at all." 12 hours. Hannah was shocked. "I haven't slept that long since I was a child." "Body knows what it needs." Sam gestured to the table, already set with plates and cups. "Sit. Food's almost ready." Hannah obeyed, suddenly aware of how ravenous she was. Sam served up bacon, eggs, and thick slices of bread slathered with butter and honey. She ate with unladylike enthusiasm, earning a raised eyebrow from her host. "When did you last eat?" he asked, watching her devour a second slice of bread. "Properly. Before I left Leadville," she admitted. "I had a few biscuits in my bag, but they were gone by yesterday morning." Sam's expression darkened. "You could have frozen to death out there." "I nearly did," Hannah acknowledged. "If I hadn't found your barn." She shook her head, not wanting to contemplate the alternative. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Sam spoke again. "Storms cleared. Ground still covered, but the skies open. Sheriff will be back." Hannah set down her fork, appetite suddenly diminished. "I should go. I've put you at enough risk already." "And go where?" "The next town is 30 miles away. You wouldn't make it half that distance in this snow." "I can't stay here," Hannah protested. "If they find me, you'll be charged with harboring a fugitive." Sam leaned back in his chair, studying her. "I've been thinking about your situation. If what you say about this Victor Holloway is true, the answer isn't running. It's proving your innocence." Hannah gave a hollow laugh. "And how exactly do I do that with the entire town of Leadville convinced of my guilt?" "Not the entire town," Sam corrected. "There must be someone who doubts the sheriff's version of events, someone who might help." Hannah considered this. "There's Dr. Porter. He treated my injuries more than once, never believed my excuses about falling or being clumsy." She chewed her lip thoughtfully. "And James's secretary, Lydia, she knew about his temper firsthand." "Good," Sam nodded. "And what about physical evidence?" "You said your husband told Victor he'd discovered something about the mine. Any idea what that might have been?" "James kept a ledger in his study. He was secretive about it, especially in recent months." Hannah's eyes widened with sudden realization. If Victor killed him, he would have wanted that ledger, but he might not have known where to look. "And you do." James had a hiding place, a false bottom in his desk drawer. "He thought I didn't know about it, but I found it years ago while cleaning." Sam's expression was calculating. "So potentially, there's evidence sitting in your husband's study that could prove someone else had motive to kill him." "Yes, but I can't exactly waltz back into town and ask to search my husband's study," Hannah pointed out. "I'd be arrested on sight." "Not if no one sees you," Sam replied with a hint of a smile. "And not if you have help." Hannah stared at him. "You can't be serious. You'd risk going back to Leadville with me." "I said it makes for an interesting change from ranching," he shrugged. "Besides, I've never been one to let an innocent person hang." "This isn't your fight, Sam." "Maybe not," he agreed. "But I've already thrown my lot in with yours by hiding you from the sheriff. Might as well see it through." He stood, gathering their plates. "We'll need a plan. And you'll need a disguise. But first, I need to tend to my stock." As Sam donned his coat and headed out to care for his animals, Hannah remained at the table, overwhelmed by his willingness to help her, a stranger who had brought nothing but trouble to his doorstep. There was more to Samuel Mercer than met the eye, and despite the danger of her situation, Hannah found herself increasingly curious about the man who had saved her life. The rest of the day passed in preparation. Sam brought in more firewood, checked his weapons, and helped Hannah create a rudimentary disguise from his sister's clothing and an old hat. They decided to leave for Leadville after nightfall the following day, reasoning that the cover of darkness would help them enter town undetected. As evening approached, Sam prepared a simple stew for dinner. The domestic routine felt strangely normal, given the circumstances. Hannah found herself watching him as he moved around the kitchen, appreciating the quiet competence in his movements. "You're staring," he observed without looking up from the pot he was stirring. Hannah flushed. "Sorry, I was just wondering. You seem comfortable with having someone else in your space. Do you live alone out here?" For the past 2 years, yes. Sam added salt to the stew. Before that, my sister Catherine lived with me for a while after her husband died. Then she remarried and moved to Denver. No wife, children, Hannah asked, then immediately regretted her boldness. I'm sorry, that's none of my business. To her relief, Sam didn't seem offended. No wife. No children. He ladled stew into bowls and brought them to the table. Had prospects once, didn't work out. Because of whatever made you wrongfully accused, Hannah ventured. Sam's jaw tightened, but after a moment he nodded. Seems fair, you know, given I know your story. He sat down heavily. I was a deputy marshal in Kansas before coming to Colorado, tracked a gang of bank robbers to a small town. There was a shootout. A young boy was killed. Hannah's breath caught. Oh, Sam. Wasn't my bullet, he continued, his voice flat. Ballistics proved it. But the boy's father was the town's mayor, powerful man. He needed someone to blame, and I was convenient. Marshal's office cleared me, but the damage was done. Couldn't stay there with half the town thinking I'd killed a child. So you came here, Hannah finished softly. Fresh start, Sam agreed. Bought this place with my savings, keep to myself mostly, less chance for trouble that way. Hannah reached across the table and touched his hand briefly. I'm sorry that happened to you. Sam looked momentarily startled by the contact, then gave her a small, sad smile. Like I said, I understand something about false accusations. They ate in silence for a while, both lost in thought. Eventually, Hannah spoke again. What's your plan for getting into Leadville? We'll take the back trails, Sam explained, seemingly grateful for the change in subject. I have a wagon. We'll cover you with supplies, make it look like I'm making a delivery. Once in town, we'll wait until after midnight to approach your house. And if we're caught, Sam's expression hardened, we won't be. You can't know that, Hannah persisted. Sheriff Blackburn is thorough. And if he catches you helping me, your fresh start here will be over. Some things matter more than fresh starts, Sam replied, meeting her eyes steadily. Like not letting an innocent woman hang for a crime she didn't commit. Hannah swallowed against the sudden tightness in her throat. Why do you believe me? You have only my word. For a long moment, Sam was silent, considering. I've dealt with enough liars and killers to recognize them. You're neither. He shrugged. Besides, a woman who runs through a blizzard rather than face a false charge has conviction I can respect. Or foolishness, Hannah suggested with a wry smile. That too, Sam agreed, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly, but mostly conviction. That night, as Hannah lay in Sam's bed listening to the occasional creak of the floorboards as he moved about in the main room, she found herself thinking not just about the danger ahead, but about the man who had become her unlikely ally. There was a quiet strength to Samuel Mercer, a sense of justice that transcended self-preservation. It was rare, especially in these wild lands where most people looked after their own interests first. And if her thoughts occasionally strayed to the warmth in his green eyes when he almost smiled, or the strength of his hands as he helped her from the barn the night before, well, that was simply gratitude. Nothing more. It had to be nothing more. Her life was complicated enough without adding inappropriate feelings for her rescuer to the mix. Still, as she drifted off to sleep, Hannah couldn't help but wonder what might have been possible in another life, one where she wasn't a fugitive, and he wasn't a man haunted by his own past. The next day dawned clear and cold. Sam spent the morning checking over his wagon and preparing supplies for their journey. Hannah helped where she could, though she found herself distracted by anxiety about returning to Leadville. What if the ledger isn't there? She asked as they loaded sacks of grain into the wagon. Or what if it doesn't contain the evidence we hope for? Then we try another approach, Sam replied calmly. You mentioned the doctor and your husband's secretary. If the ledger fails, we speak to them. And if they won't help? Sam straightened, fixing her with a steady gaze. We'll find a way, Hannah. I promise you that. Something in his voice, the absolute certainty of it, eased Hannah's fears. This man barely knew her, yet his determination to help was unwavering. It was a novel experience after years with James, whose promises had proven as substantial as morning mist. By mid-afternoon, the wagon was loaded and ready. Sam had created a hidden compartment beneath the supplies where Hannah could conceal herself as they approached town. The plan was to leave at sunset, timing their arrival in Leadville for well after dark when most of the town would be asleep. As they ate a light meal before departure, Sam handed Hannah a small revolver. "Do you know how to use this?" Hannah took the gun, testing its weight. James kept firearms. He made sure I knew the basics. "Good, it's loaded. 5 shots." Sam's expression was grave. "I'm not expecting trouble, but if it comes to it, don't hesitate. Your life may depend on it." Hannah nodded, tucking the revolver into the pocket of the coat Sam had given her one of his, altered hastily to fit her smaller frame. "I understand." The sun was beginning its descent when they finished their preparations. Sam hitched his sturdy draft horses to the wagon while Hannah secured the last of their supplies. As she worked, a realization struck her with sudden force. Regardless of what happened in Leadville, her life would never return to what it had been. Even if she proved her innocence, the shadow of James's death would follow her. She was truly starting over with nothing but the borrowed clothes on her back. The thought was both terrifying and strangely liberating. "Ready?" Sam asked, extending a hand to help her onto the wagon seat. Hannah took a deep breath, then placed her hand in his. "Ready." The journey to Leadville took nearly 4 hours. As they approached the outskirts of town, Hannah climbed into the hidden compartment beneath the grain sacks, the small space barely large enough for her to lie flat. Through the cracks between the wooden slats, she watched the stars disappear as they entered the town proper. Leadville had boomed with the discovery of silver, transforming from a small mining camp to a bustling town of several thousand in just a few years. Even at this late hour, light spilled from saloons and the occasional respectable establishment. Piano music drifted through the cold night air as Sam guided the wagon carefully down the main street. Hannah's heart pounded as they passed the sheriff's office, but the windows were dark. Further on, she glimpsed her former home, a 2-story clapboard house set back from the street, grander than its neighbors but not ostentatious. No lights burned in the windows. Sam continued past, turning onto a side street and eventually stopping in an alley behind a livery stable. "All clear," he murmured, helping Hannah emerge from her hiding place. "Which way to your house?" "This way," Hannah whispered, leading him through back alleys she knew well from years of living in Leadville. They kept to the shadows, avoiding the occasional late-night reveler stumbling home from the saloons. At last, they reached the back of the McAllister house. Hannah tried the kitchen door, finding it locked. "There's a key hidden beneath that flower pot," she whispered, pointing. Sam retrieved the key and opened the door carefully. They slipped inside, the familiar smells of the house furniture polish, fading potpourri, the lingering scent of tobacco from James's cigars washing over Hannah like a physical force. Memories threatened to overwhelm her, but she pushed them aside. They had work to do. "The study is through here," she murmured, leading Sam through the darkened house. James's study was exactly as Hannah remembered it, a masculine space dominated by a large desk and leather chairs. Heavy curtains covered the windows, allowing Sam to light a small lamp without fear of being observed from outside. "The ledger would be in the desk?" Sam asked, keeping his voice low. Hannah nodded, moving to the ornate desk. "There's a drawer on the right side." The false bottom is triggered by pressing here. She demonstrated, and with a soft click, a hidden compartment was revealed. To her relief, the ledger was still there, a leather-bound book filled with James's meticulous handwriting. Hannah flipped through it quickly, her eyes widening as she scanned the entries. "What is it?" Sam asked, moving closer. "It's all here," Hannah breathed. James was tracking discrepancies in the mine's output. Pages of calculations proving that ore was being diverted before it reached the official records. She turned to the final entries. Here, 3 days before he died, he wrote that he had proof Victor was selling ore on the side and pocketing the profits. He was planning to confront him with evidence the next day. Sam leaned over her shoulder, examining the ledger. "That's motive for murder, clear as day." "And not just murder," Hannah said slowly, her finger tracing a particular entry. James wrote that he suspected Victor of tampering with support beams in the mine, making it appear unsafe to drive down the value so James would agree to sell. "Tampering that could have killed miners," Sam said grimly. "That's a hanging offense in itself." Hannah closed the ledger. "We need to take this to someone we can trust, not Sheriff Blackburn. He and Victor are close." "The territorial judge," Sam suggested. "When is he next in town?" Before Hannah could answer, a floorboard creaked in the hallway outside the study. Sam extinguished the lamp immediately, drawing his revolver in one fluid motion. Hannah clutched the ledger to her chest, her heart hammering. The study door swung open slowly, revealing a slender figure holding a shotgun. "Who's there?" a woman's voice demanded shakily. "I've already sent for the sheriff." Hannah stepped forward into the shaft of moonlight coming through the window. "Lydia, it's me, Hannah." The shotgun wavered, then lowered. "Mrs. McAllister, they said you killed Mr. McAllister and ran." "I didn't kill him, Lydia," Hannah said quietly. "But I think I know who did." Lydia Pearson had been James's secretary for nearly 5 years. A spinster in her 30s, she was meticulous and loyal, qualities James had valued in his business dealings. She lit a lamp, her face pale as she took in Hannah's appearance and the stranger beside her. "This is Samuel Mercer," Hannah introduced. "He's helping me prove my innocence." Lydia nodded cautiously. "What are you doing here? It's dangerous for you to be in town." "We found evidence," Hannah explained, holding up the ledger. "James was tracking Victor's theft from the mine. He knew Victor was stealing from him, and he documented everything." Lydia's eyes widened. "I knew Mr. McAllister was suspicious. He had me tracking shipment weights for months." She set the shotgun aside. "But why are you here instead of taking this to the authorities?" "Because Sheriff Blackburn is Victor's friend," Hannah said bitterly. "He decided I was guilty before James's body was even cold." "That's true enough," Lydia agreed. "The sheriff barely investigated, just declared you the killer and organized a posse." She hesitated. "Have you sent for Judge Morrison? He's due in town tomorrow for circuit court." Sam and Hannah exchanged a look. "We didn't know," Sam admitted. "That changes things. If the judge is arriving tomorrow, we need to get this evidence to him directly." "You can't stay here," Lydia said firmly. "Mrs. Peterson next door saw your light. That's why I came over. I've been staying here to keep an eye on things. If she's sent for the sheriff like she threatened, he'll be here any minute." As if summoned by her words, they heard the sound of approaching horses. Sam moved to the window, peering through a gap in the curtains. 3 riders. One looks like the sheriff. "The back door," Hannah said urgently. "Quickly." They hurried through the house, but as they reached the kitchen, voices sounded outside the back entrance. "They're surrounding the place," Sam muttered. "Is there another way out?" "The cellar," Hannah decided. "It has an old coal chute that opens onto the side yard." Lydia led them to the cellar door, her hands trembling as she lit a lantern. "I'll try to stall them," she promised. "Get to Judge Morrison. He's staying at the Grand Hotel. Come with us, Hannah urged. Victor might suspect your involvement, Lydia shook her head. If I disappear too, it will only confirm their suspicions. Go, I'll be fine. With reluctance, Hannah followed Sam down the narrow stairs into the damp cellar. Behind them, they heard Lydia greeting the sheriff at the front door, her voice unnaturally high as she claimed to be checking on strange noises. Here, Hannah whispered, pointing to a rusted metal door set into the stone foundation. The coal chute. It hasn't been used in years. Sam forced the door open, grimacing at the screech of metal. Beyond was a narrow passage sloping upward to a grate at street level. I'll go first, he murmured. Hand me the ledger. Hannah passed him the precious book, then watched as Sam squeezed his broad shoulders through the opening, climbing the incline with careful movements to avoid making noise. When he reached the grate, he pushed it open slowly, checking for deputies before signaling Hannah to follow. The passage was tight, the stone walls rough against Hannah's shoulders as she crawled upward. Sam's hand appeared at the top, helping pull her through the grate and onto the narrow side yard of the house. They crouched in the shadows, listening to the muffled voices of the search party inside. This way, Hannah whispered, leading Sam toward a neighboring yard. They had almost reached the street when a shout went up from the house. They found the open chute, Sam said grimly. Run! They sprinted down the dark street, the sound of pursuit growing behind them. Hannah's lungs burned as she pushed herself to keep pace with Sam's longer strides. They turned corners at random, trying to lose their pursuers in Leadville's maze of streets. The hotel's too obvious, Sam panted as they ducked into an alley. They'll check there first. The church, Hannah suggested between breaths. Father Michael knows me. He might help. The small Catholic church sat on the edge of town, its spire visible in the moonlight. They made their way toward it, keeping to back streets and shadows. By the time they reached the church's side door, the sounds of pursuit had faded, but they knew it was only temporary. Once Sheriff Blackburn organized his men, they would search every building in Leadville. Hannah knocked softly on the door to the attached rectory. After a moment, it opened to reveal a sleepy-eyed priest in his 50s. Mrs. McAllister. Father Michael blinked in confusion. They said you were. Please, Father, Hannah interrupted. We need sanctuary, just until morning. I can explain everything. The priest hesitated only briefly before stepping aside. Come in, quickly. Inside the small rectory, Hannah made hurried introductions and explained their situation. Father Michael listened gravely, his expression darkening when Hannah described the evidence against Victor Holloway. I never liked that man, the priest admitted. Too smooth by half, and the way he started sniffing around your husband's business before James was even buried. He shook his head in disgust. You can stay here tonight. There's a room in the back of the church used for storage, not comfortable but safe. Thank you, Father, Hannah said, relief washing over her. I'll go to the Grand Hotel at first light, Sam added. Speak to the judge before the sheriff can get to him. Father Michael nodded approvingly. Judge Morrison is a fair man, he'll listen. He glanced at Hannah's exhausted face. Rest now, I'll keep watch. The storage room was small, filled with boxes of hymn books and church supplies. A narrow cot used for visiting clergy was the only furniture. Father Michael brought them blankets and a lantern before leaving them to rest. You take the cot, Sam insisted. I'll keep watch from here. He positioned himself near the door, the ledger secure beside him. Hannah was too tired to argue. As she settled onto the cot, she found herself studying Sam in the lantern light, the strong line of his jaw, the watchful intensity in his eyes as he guarded their precious evidence. You didn't have to do any of this, she said softly. You could have turned me away that first night. Sam glanced at her, his expression softening slightly. Couldn't have lived with myself if I had. Still, Hannah persisted, you've risked everything for a stranger. Your ranch, your freedom, maybe even your life. He was quiet for a long moment. Maybe I'm tired of standing aside when I could help. Did enough of that in Kansas. His voice dropped lower. Besides, you're not exactly a stranger anymore. Something in his tone made Hannah's heart beat faster. She wanted to respond, to acknowledge the unspoken current that had been building between them since that first night, but exhaustion was pulling her under. The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was Sam's steady gaze, watchful and protective in the gentle lantern light. Dawn was breaking when Hannah awoke to Sam's hand on her shoulder. "It's time," he murmured. "Father Michael says the judge is at breakfast in the hotel dining room." Hannah sat up, momentarily disoriented before the events of the previous days came rushing back. "I'll come with you." Sam shook his head. "Too risky. You're too recognizable. I'll take the ledger to the judge and bring him here." "But Hannah," Sam's voice was gentle but firm, "trust me, I'll handle this." After a moment, Hannah nodded reluctantly. Sam was right, her presence would only complicate matters. "Be careful." Sam's eyes held hers for a heartbeat longer than necessary. "Always am." He tucked the ledger inside his coat and slipped out through the church's side door. Father Michael brought Hannah bread and coffee, along with clean water to wash her face. The waiting was excruciating. Every sound from outside made her start, imagining the sheriff's men discovering her hiding place. Nearly 2 hours passed before the door finally opened. Hannah rose to her feet, relief flooding her at the sight of Sam unharmed and accompanied by an older man with a stern countenance whom she recognized as Judge Morrison. Behind them came Father Michael, his expression cautiously optimistic. "Mrs. McAllister," the judge greeted her formally. "Mr. Mercer has shown me some very disturbing evidence. I'd like to hear your account of events." Hannah related her story, starting with James's increasing suspicions about Victor's business practices and ending with her discovery of the ledger the previous night. The judge listened without interruption, occasionally nodding as her account matched details from the ledger. "This is quite serious," he said when she finished. "If what you and this ledger suggest is true, Mr. Holloway has committed not only murder but potentially endangered the lives of dozens of minors with his tampering." "It's true, Your Honor," Hannah insisted. "James was many things, not all of them good, but he was meticulous about his records. Everything in that ledger can be verified." Judge Morrison stroked his beard thoughtfully. "I've already dispatched riders to bring Sheriff Blackburn and Mr. Holloway to the courthouse. I think it's time we get to the bottom of this matter properly." He turned to Sam. "Mr. Mercer, I'd appreciate if you would escort Mrs. McAllister to my chambers through the back entrance. We'll avoid any unnecessary complications that way." Sam nodded, understanding the judge's meaning. If Hannah were seen on the streets, someone might take matters into their own hands before justice could be served. The walk to the courthouse was tense, with Hannah keeping her head down and Sam's reassuring presence beside her. They entered through a service door, guided by one of the judge's clerks to a private chamber where they could wait. "What now?" Hannah asked once they were alone. "Now we let the law work," Sam replied. Judge Morrison seemed convinced by the evidence. And he's not a man easily swayed by local politics. Hannah paced the small room nervously. "Victor won't go down without a fight. He has friends in town, influence." "So did your husband," Sam pointed out. "And the judge has the authority to call in federal marshals if needed." Before Hannah could respond, the door opened to admit Judge Morrison and a harried-looking clerk. "Sheriff Blackburn and Mr. Holloway have arrived," the judge informed them, "along with your husband's secretary, who has some additional evidence to present." He fixed Hannah with a penetrating gaze. "Are you prepared to face them, Mrs. McAllister? It won't be pleasant." Hannah straightened her shoulders. "I've been running long enough, Your Honor. I'm ready." The courtroom was crowded despite the early hour, word having spread rapidly about the dramatic developments. Hannah kept her eyes forward as Sam escorted her to a seat near the front, ignoring the whispers that followed her. At the prosecution table sat Victor Holloway, his usually immaculate appearance somewhat disheveled, as if he'd been roused from bed in a hurry. Beside him, Sheriff Blackburn looked thunderous. Judge Morrison called the court to order with a sharp rap of his gavel. "This is an extraordinary session to review new evidence in the matter of James McAllister's murder," he announced. "Sheriff Blackburn, I understand you've been pursuing Mrs. McAllister as your primary suspect." "She ran, Your Honor," Blackburn stated flatly. "Innocent people don't run." "Sometimes they do when they believe justice is not forthcoming," the judge countered. He held up James's ledger. "This document suggests a compelling alternative motive for Mr. McAllister's murder, one that points not to his wife, but to his business partner." Victor surged to his feet. "This is preposterous. I demand to know what lies that woman has been spreading." "Sit down, Mr. Holloway," Judge Morrison ordered sharply. "You'll have your chance to speak. First, I'd like to hear from Miss Pearson." Lydia approached the bench, visibly nervous but determined. In her hands, she carried a stack of papers. "Your Honor, these are copies of correspondence between Mr. McAllister and the assayer's office in Denver. They confirm the discrepancies noted in Mr. McAllister's ledger regarding silver ore shipments." "And how did you come to possess these letters?" the judge inquired. "Mr. McAllister instructed me to make copies of all correspondence regarding the mine," Lydia explained. "He became suspicious last fall when the mine's profits decreased despite consistent ore quality. The night before he died, he asked me to compile all the evidence for a meeting with his lawyers." Victor's face had grown increasingly pale as Lydia spoke. Sheriff Blackburn shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Furthermore," Lydia continued, gaining confidence, "Mr. Holloway came to the office the morning after Mr. McAllister's body was discovered, demanding access to his papers. When I refused without proper authorization, he threatened my position." Judge Morrison accepted the documents, examining them briefly before setting them aside. "Sheriff Blackburn, given this new evidence, I'm ordering you to take Mr. Holloway into custody while we investigate these allegations." "This is outrageous," Victor exploded. "You can't possibly believe this fabricated nonsense over my word. I'm a respected businessman in this community." "So was James McAllister," the judge replied evenly. "Sheriff, do your duty." For a moment, it seemed Blackburn might refuse. His gaze shifted between Victor and the judge, calculations visible in his expression. Then, with visible reluctance, he stood and approached his former friend. "Victor Holloway, you're under arrest on suspicion of the murder of James McAllister." The courtroom erupted in murmurs as Blackburn led a protesting Victor away. Judge Morrison rapped his gavel for order. "As for you, Mrs. McAllister," he continued when the room quieted, "the charges against you are suspended pending further investigation. However, I must ask that you remain in Leadville and make yourself available for questioning as needed." "Of course, Your Honor," Hannah agreed, relief washing over her. "It wasn't a full exoneration, but it was a start." "Court is adjourned," the judge declared, rising from the bench. As the courtroom cleared, Hannah remained seated, overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. Sam's hand came to rest briefly on her shoulder. "It's over," he said quietly. "At least the running part." Hannah looked up at him, emotions too complex to name swirling within her. "I don't know how to thank you." "No need," Sam replied, that hint of a smile touching his lips. "Though I wouldn't say no to a hot meal that isn't my own cooking." Hannah laughed, the sound surprising her after so many days of fear. "I think that can be arranged." They left the courthouse together, stepping into the bright Colorado morning. For the first time since fleeing into the snow 5 days earlier, Hannah walked openly on Leadville streets. Some townsfolk stared, others nodded cautiously. News traveled fast in small towns, and the dramatic courthouse scene would already be spreading. "What will you do now?" Sam asked as they made their way to the hotel restaurant. Hannah considered the question. "I don't know. The house was James's, but with his death, I suppose it's mine now. Though I'm not sure I want to stay there with all those memories." "You could sell," Sam suggested. "Start fresh somewhere else. Perhaps." Hannah glanced at him. "What about you? Will you return to your ranch eventually?" Sam nodded. "Though I might stay in town a few days. Make sure everything settles as it should." The unspoken question hung between them: what happened after those few days? Hannah pushed it aside for now. Today was for celebrating small victories, not worrying about tomorrow's uncertainties. The hotel restaurant was quiet at mid-morning. They found a table near the window, ordered coffee and a substantial breakfast. As they waited for their food, Hannah studied Sam's face in the clear light of day. The past few days had left little time for such observations, but now she noticed the faint lines around his eyes, the slight scar along his jawline, the way the morning light brought out auburn highlights in his dark hair. "You're staring again," he noted, echoing his words from days before. Hannah didn't look away this time, just thinking how strange life is. "A week ago I didn't know you existed, now I owe you everything." "Not everything," Sam corrected. "You found the evidence. You stood your ground in that courtroom. Your courage did that, not me." "Still," Hannah insisted, "I wouldn't be sitting here if you hadn't hidden me that night." Their food arrived, temporarily halting the conversation. As they ate, Hannah found herself wondering what would happen when this interlude ended. Sam would return to his ranch and she would. What? Stay in Leadville where half the town still suspected her. Move to Denver. Start over somewhere entirely new. "What are you thinking?" Sam asked, interrupting her thoughts. Hannah hesitated, then decided on honesty. "That I don't want to stay in Leadville, but I'm not sure where to go instead." Sam was quiet for a moment, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "My ranch isn't much compared to what you're used to. Small house, lot of work, not many neighbors." He met her eyes. "But it's peaceful, good place to figure things out." Hannah's heart quickened. "Are you offering me a place to stay?" "If you want it," he replied, a hint of vulnerability in his usually steady gaze. "No obligations, just a place to catch your breath before deciding what's next." The offer was tempting more than tempting. In the short time she'd known him, Samuel Mercer had shown more decency and courage than most men she'd met in her lifetime. And if she were honest with herself, there was something else growing between them, something she wasn't ready to name but couldn't deny. "I'd like that," Hannah said softly. "Thank you." The relief that crossed Sam's face was brief but unmistakable. "Good. That's good." The next 3 days passed in a whirlwind of legal proceedings. Victor Holloway remained in custody, his protests diminishing as more evidence emerged. A search of his home revealed documents proving he had been selling diverted ore to a buyer in Denver, and a mine inspection confirmed tampering with support beams. Most damning of all, one of Victor's servants came forward, admitting she had seen her employer return home in the early hours after James's murder, his clothes stained with what might have been blood. Hannah, with Sam's steady support, endured questioning and testified about James's suspicions. By the end of the 3rd day, Judge Morrison officially cleared her of all charges related to her husband's death. Victor, meanwhile, was bound over for trial, facing charges of murder, fraud, and criminal endangerment. Throughout it all, Sam remained at Hannah's side, a quiet, reassuring presence as she navigated the curious stares and whispered comments of Leadville's residents. In the evenings, they shared meals at the hotel, learning more about each other with each passing day. Hannah told Sam about her childhood in Pennsylvania, her dreams of teaching, how she'd come west seeking adventure and independence. Sam spoke of his family in Missouri, his years as a lawman, his hopes for expanding his small ranch someday. With each conversation, the connection between them deepened, transcending their extraordinary circumstances to something more fundamental, a recognition of kindred spirits who had both known hardship and emerged stronger. On the fourth morning, Hannah stood in what had been her bedroom in the McAllister house, packing the few belongings she wished to keep. Most of the house's contents would be sold, the proceeds partly used to compensate the miners who had been endangered by Victor's tampering. Hannah had insisted on that provision, and Judge Morrison had readily agreed. A knock at the doorframe drew her attention. Sam stood there, hat in hand. "Wagons loaded, ready when you are." Hannah nodded, securing the small trunk containing her personal items. "Just one more thing." She crossed to the dresser, opening the top drawer to retrieve a small wooden box. Inside lay her mother's cameo brooch and a handful of letters, the only mementos she truly valued from her life before. "That's everything?" Sam asked, eyeing the modest collection of belongings. "Everything worth keeping," Hannah confirmed. She took one last look around the room that had been both sanctuary and prison during her marriage. "I'm ready." Sam helped her load the trunk into the wagon, then offered his hand to assist her onto the seat beside him. The gesture was practical, yet Hannah found herself lingering at the warmth of his palm against hers, the gentle strength in his grip. These small moments of contact had become increasingly precious over the past days. As they pulled away from the house, Hannah felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. Leadville had never truly been home, just a place where circumstances had led her. Now, heading out of town toward the mountains beyond, she felt a sense of possibility she hadn't experienced in years. "Second thoughts?" Sam asked, noticing her pensive expression. Hannah shook her head. "No, just closing a chapter, I suppose." They traveled in comfortable silence for a while, the familiar landscape of snow-covered fields and distant peaks gradually replacing the bustling streets of Leadville. The same route Hannah had fled along days earlier now felt entirely different, a path forward rather than an escape. "I've been thinking," Sam said eventually, his eyes on the road ahead. "About what happens next." Hannah glanced at him. "What do you mean, for you, at the ranch?" He adjusted the reins, seemingly gathering his thoughts. "I meant what I said about no obligations. You can stay as long as you need to figure things out. But—" When he didn't continue, Hannah prompted gently, "But—" Sam looked at her then, something vulnerable and hopeful in his expression. "But I'd be lying if I said I hadn't thought about you staying, not just temporarily." Hannah's breath caught. "Sam, I know it's too soon," he continued quickly. "We've known each other less than a week. You've just been through hell. The last thing you need is—" "Is what?" Hannah asked softly when he trailed off. Sam's hands tightened on the reins. "Is some ranch hand with a complicated past presuming too much?" Hannah reached out, covering his hand with hers. "You're hardly some ranch hand, Samuel Mercer. You're the man who saved my life. Who believed in me when no one else did." She took a deep breath. "And yes, it is soon, but these past days have felt like a lifetime. I've seen your character in ways most people never get to see another's." Hope kindled in Sam's eyes. "What are you saying, Hannah?" "I'm saying I'd like to stay. Not just to figure things out." She smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. I'm saying I think there might be something worth building between us, if you're willing to be patient while we discover what that is." Sam's expression transformed, the full smile she'd only glimpsed in fragments finally breaking across his face. "Patience I've got plenty of. Been waiting for something worth waiting for." The wagon crested a hill, revealing the valley beyond where Sam's modest ranch nestled against the foothills. In the clear winter light, Hannah could see the barn where she'd first sought refuge, the small house with smoke curling from its chimney, the corral where horses moved in lazy circles. It wasn't grand. It wasn't even particularly remarkable. But as Sam urged the horses forward, Hannah felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This place and this man represented not just safety, but the promise of something she'd long stopped believing in, a genuine partnership built on respect and trust. "Welcome home," Sam said quietly as they approached the ranch. "For as long as you want it to be." Hannah leaned slightly against his shoulder, allowing herself to imagine a future unfolding here, days of honest work and quiet evenings, challenges faced together, a life built on choice rather than circumstance. "Home," she repeated, testing the word and finding it felt right. "I think I'd like that very much." As the wagon pulled up to the house, the sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light across the snow-covered landscape. Hannah McAllister, no longer running, no longer afraid, stepped down onto solid ground, ready to begin again. Spring came to the Colorado mountains in fits and starts, snow giving way to mud, then tentative green. Hannah watched the transformation from the porch of Sam's house, their house now, in many ways, though they maintained separate sleeping arrangements. The past 3 months had been a time of healing and discovery, of learning to trust not just each other, but herself. Sam approached from the barn, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Fence in the north pasture is fixed," he reported, settling beside her on the porch steps. "Should hold through the spring runoff." "Good," Hannah nodded. "I was thinking of planting a vegetable garden once the ground thaws properly. Would be nice to have fresh produce come summer." Sam smiled at her enthusiasm. "Sounds like you're planning to stay a while. Is that all right?" Hannah asked, suddenly uncertain. They hadn't spoken explicitly about long-term arrangements since that conversation on the wagon months ago. "More than all right," Sam assured her, his hand finding hers on the weathered wood of the porch step. "Place feels more like home with you here." It was true. In the months since Hannah had arrived, the small ranch house had transformed. Curtains now hung in windows that had been bare for years. Wildflowers brightened the table. The bookshelf in the main room held volumes from both their collections, intermingled like a conversation between kindred spirits. More than the physical changes, though, was the shift in atmosphere. There was laughter now, conversations that stretched long into the evening, companionable silences that needed no filling. They worked side by side during the days, Hannah learning the rhythms of ranch life, Sam rediscovering the pleasure of sharing his world with someone who appreciated it. And beneath it all, growing steadily stronger, was the undeniable current between them. They hadn't rushed it, both understanding the value of building something solid first. But the casual touches had become more frequent, the glances more lingering. Hannah found herself increasingly aware of Sam's presence in a way that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with deeper feelings. "I got a letter from Judge Morrison yesterday," Hannah mentioned, watching the sunset paint the distant peaks in gold and pink. "Victor Holloway's trial is set for next month. They want me to testify." Sam's hand tightened slightly around hers. "Will you go?" Hannah nodded. "I need to. For James, despite everything, and for myself." She turned to face him. "Will you come with me?" "Of course," Sam replied without hesitation. "Wouldn't let you face that alone." The simple assurance warmed Hannah more than the spring sunshine. That was the essence of what had grown between them, the certainty that neither needed to face life's challenges alone anymore. As twilight deepened around them, Hannah made a decision. She'd been waiting for the perfect moment, but perhaps there was no such thing. Perhaps courage was simply recognizing when something was worth the risk. "Sam," she began, her heart quickening, "these past months have been. I've never felt so at peace, so at home." He turned to her, those green eyes attentive. "I feel the same way." Hannah took a deep breath. "When we first met, you saved me, but what's happened since then, that's been something else entirely, something I never expected to find again." "Hannah," Sam said softly, his free hand coming up to brush a strand of hair from her face. "I love you," she said simply. "I don't need more time to know that. I love your kindness, your quiet strength, the way you see the world. I love who I am when I'm with you." For a moment, Sam seemed stunned into silence. Then, with a gentleness that belied his strength, he cupped her face in his hands. "I've been waiting to hear those words," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "Been wanting to say them myself for weeks now. I love you, Hannah. Have since. Well, probably since you stood in my barn that night, half frozen but still fighting." The kiss that followed was both an ending and a beginning, the culmination of months of growing closeness and the promise of something new. When they finally parted, Hannah rested her forehead against his, content in the knowledge that some journeys, no matter how they begin, lead exactly where you're meant to be. "Stay with me," Sam murmured. "Not just for now, for good." Hannah smiled, her answer already written in her heart long before he asked. "I'd like nothing better." The trial came and went. Justice served as Victor Holloway was convicted not only of James's murder, but of criminal negligence that had endangered countless minors. Hannah testified with quiet dignity, Sam's steady presence in the courtroom giving her strength. When it was over, they returned to the ranch, no longer harboring shadows from the past. That summer, they were married in a simple ceremony at the small church in the nearby town, with Father Michael, who had helped them during their darkest hour, traveling from Leadville to perform the service. Catherine came from Denver with her husband and children, delighted to see her brother so happy at last. Life settled into a rhythm challenging at times, but deeply satisfying. The ranch prospered under their joint care, expanding gradually as they acquired more land and livestock. Hannah started a small school for the children of neighboring ranchers, fulfilling her original calling while creating something new. Years passed, bringing changes and blessings in equal measure. Their family grew with the birth of first a son, then twin daughters who inherited their father's green eyes and their mother's determination. The house expanded to accommodate them, rooms added as needed, the porch widened for summer evenings spent watching the sunset. On the 10th anniversary of the night Hannah had fled through the snow, she and Sam sat on that porch, watching their children play in the yard. The oldest boy was helping his sisters build a snow fort, their laughter carrying on the clear winter air. "Ever regret it?" Sam asked, his arm around her shoulders. "The way things turned out," Hannah leaned into his embrace, considering the journey that had brought them here from a desperate flight through a blizzard to the life they'd built together. "Not for a moment," she replied, turning to kiss him softly. "Some storms bring you exactly where you need to be." As twilight settled over the Colorado mountains, Hannah McAllister Mercer looked out at the life she never could have imagined that terrifying night when she ran from the sheriff through deep snow. The cowboy who had hidden her in his barn until they passed had become her partner, her love, her home. And in that knowledge, she found a peace as enduring as the mountains themselves.